Welcome to another episode of the Boss Experience podcast. Today I'm here with Dr. Rowena Winkler, and we're going to talk about how she got from academia to being a cosmic catalyst and a realignment strategist. So, with that being said, Dr. Rowena, how did you get from academia to a realignment strategist and a cosmic catalyst coach? And what does that even mean?
Well, first of all, Michelle, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, that sounds like quite a transition or quite a journey. So I will keep it as brief as possible. So, yeah, I got my PhD in communication in 2013 from the University of Maryland. Go Terps. And when I got my degrees, I got my bachelor's, my master's, and my PhD in less than 10 years. So to say that I'm a very motivated, academic, nerdy person is a bit of an understatement there. But when I stepped into this higher education environment, I thought this is it. I want to teach people. I want to help students. I am going to make my contribution by being a professor, and that will be it. That is my career. Well, after I got my doctorate, I went to my first tenure track position, and several things happened. First of all, in that first year of my new job, my father passed away from cancer. And as I'm sure folks who are listening can attest, when you lose someone so incredibly close to you, especially for me, I was young and I lost my father, it really changed things for me. It made me think about, what am I doing here? What is my legacy? What do I want to contribute? And I already had feelings before this moment that maybe this isn't necessarily the right path for me. So when I was in this job as a professor, I was super stressed out. I was going home crying pretty much every night in this house that I have at this job. I experienced, as a faculty person of color, I am Filipina American, and as a person of color in this institution, I felt that there wasn't enough being done to support faculty, people of color, and I felt that I was tokenized a bit, right? That it was like, well, we need someone on XYZ committee, that cosmetic diversity and inclusion. Let's just put Rowena there, right? And meanwhile, my amazing students, many of whom I still keep in touch with today, were marching the streets, right? They were protesting. They were just so inspirational. And it just seemed like I could do so much more. And that my mental health, especially after seeing my father get sick and pass away, it was just not worth it to me at that point. So after a couple of years thinking about this, pondering this, one of my really amazing mentors left the university to go somewhere else, I decided it was time to go. And so even though I had invested so much time, energy, money, right? Because education is not cheap.
And those student loans.
Oh, girl, let's not, yeah, with the student loans, right? I decided to walk away from academia, and I felt like I was a failure. I felt like I had let people down, because I didn't even mention this. Back at the University of Maryland, I was considered a quote unquote rock star grad student. I was getting all the awards, I was getting all the accolades. I was seen as this bright, shining star of my department. And here I am 3 years later deciding this is not exactly what I had wanted. I didn't want to go this tenure track path when I felt like my gifts and talents could be served elsewhere. And so I left academia and I went into the communication and marketing industry, where I worked as a copywriter for a design company, an architectural design, computer assisted design company. And then I moved on from there into a digital marketing agency, where I was working with clients and helping build websites and writing copy and things of that nature. But again, I was like, okay, this is cool. Like, I'm using the talents that I've taught my students as a communication professor, but it's just still, I'm not getting lit up. I don't have that passion, right? It's just something still didn't feel right. And again, major milestones happened. I gave birth to my beautiful baby girl, Kerrigan Lee, and that in and of itself was not an easy process. After almost 2 years of trying to get pregnant, we went through in vitro fertilization to have her. And so that was a very emotional process, but she's here. And then, literally days afterward, COVID-19 happens.
Wow.
So it was the death of my father that was a turning point, and the birth of my daughter. And that was when I decided to launch my business. Now, Michele, I've always had aspirations to be a small business owner, and I've tried to find out what is that exactly. And so in 2020, I kicked off my LLC, and it initially was just an astrology practice. So I had been intrigued by astrology. I had been interested in it. Friends would ask me about it. And finally, I was like, well, I'm getting asked this enough, and I feel like folks are getting very interested in it. Why don't I do it as a profession? So I was doing astrology readings. Yeah, go ahead.
How did you come to get into astrology? Is that something that took place, like you got into it from childhood, or?
So, of course, everyone is familiar with their sun sign, their zodiac sign. So I had known about that growing up, but it was actually at that first, again, it's so amazing when you look back on your journey, the things that happen for a reason. It was at that first academic job where I had colleagues that were really interested in it. And it's funny, at the time of this recording, Michele, we just finished another period of Mercury retrograde, which I know a lot of people are familiar with, but essentially it's this 3-week period where technology, communication, and transportation can get a little jacked up, because Mercury, instead of, seemingly moving forwards, it looks like it's going backwards. And Mercury is the planet of communication and travel. Is named after the messenger god, right? So I remember at this time, I was having a lot of miscommunication issues with my then boyfriend, now my husband. And finally, I saw something about Mercury retrograde on Snapchat, I believe it was, or something like that. And I went to my work colleague, and said, is this the reason? And she's like, oh, girl, sit down. And to this day, she's one of my really close friends and colleagues, amazing business owner herself. She started her own business after we both left this workplace. And yeah, so it was just a work colleague at that first job that didn't serve me in terms of work, but it served me on this trajectory. I got books, I studied, I learned, and 8 years later, I was like, well, I might as well do readings and help folks, through this modality. But again, Michele, it was like, this does not feel right. And then it was that whole, and I'm sure a lot of listeners can attest to this as a business owner, that whole content grind, right? Like, oh, I got to pump out content. I got to do this thing. And it just felt so contrived, and it was just forced. And I was like, let me take a pause. So I took a bit of a hiatus at the end of 2020. 2021 happens. We're still in the thick of COVID. And I had a sit down with my amazing friend and fellow coach, Joanna Platt. She's amazing. And she was like, Rowena, your zone of genius is just helping other people find their voice, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, you're so right. And then another really good friend, my friend Caitlin, who I did an astrology reading for, said, Rowena, given your experiences as a teacher, a mentor, a writer, you should really infuse and integrate the astrology into a coaching practice. I could really see you as a coach. And I said, that's interesting. And so in February, earlier this year in 2021, I rebranded, and now I integrate astrology, tarot. I also do a little human design, and I work with women who are trying to find their voice, trying to move forward with intentionality and confidence, finding that authentic, powerful goddess self. And I use a lot of these. That's where the cosmic catalyst part comes from, right? So I help women find that spark that's going to light them up and lead them to that soul purpose. And using my experiences as a marketing professional, as a professor, to make that more tangible, right? Because when you think of things like astrology, like the woo-woo, right? It seems very esoteric, but it's that left brain, right brain. It's taking those practices and I come up with a very tangible action plan based on all of these things that come up in your blueprint to help you move forward, whether it's life path, career, relationship, all three. Yeah. So it's been super fun. And it has been less than a year at this point as we're recording this, and it's been quite a journey. So that's it. Okay, so
Wow.
that was like what, 10 minutes or so? I'm trying
So
to keep it sweet.
no, it's okay, because I think it's important to understand, like, how do people kind of get where they are. So, one thing I think we tend to not realize when it's happening is we are raised as robots, essentially.
Mm,
So we are raised to kind of move through life like doing what we think we're supposed to do.
yes.
And then when we kind of step outside the lines and we're like, I'm not fulfilled with this. I'm not fulfilled with this career. I'm not fulfilled with this relationship. I'm not fulfilled with the lack of contribution, the lack of contribution I'm making
Mm-hmm.
on this planet. People look at us like we're crazy. What do you mean you're not fulfilled? You have a house, you have this, you have that. And all of those things are not fulfilling. So
Yes.
it's interesting to hear your journey and how you've kind of moved through, and you're like, I'm not happy. Let
Mm-hmm.
me try this. I'm not happy here either. Let me try this. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's so important, and I'm sure you're going to talk about this, to get aligned with what you're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of, taking care of everyone else, we kind of forget what we're passionate about because we're so busy being robots. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh my goodness, Michelle. Yes, I co-sign on that 1000%. We as a society, we're conditioned, right, that we have to hit, as you mentioned, these milestones, these check boxes. I graduated, I got the degree, now I got the job, check. Now I gotta find the partner, check. Then I gotta find the house, check. So we are conditioned to, as you said, be these robots that do these things. And it's interesting that when folks like you and me, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast, when you finally find that thing, and that may mean going against the grain, right? That might mean doing something that defies expectations, and people are looking at you like, what is happening there? But I will say, as someone who has done it, those same people notice that change, right? They notice your energy has shifted, that spirit. So you just seem different. And I know when I've gone on this part of my journey in this past year or so, people have noticed. People have said, Rowena, what you're doing is so interesting. You just seem, there's just a radiance, right? There's just an aura of that passion that people see when you are doing the thing, even though that's not exactly the thing maybe even you thought you would be doing at this point in your journey. But that's what makes life so interesting, right, Michelle? We
Right.
we we aren't robots, and we are meant to have, hills and valleys, and that's what makes it so interesting.
And I
Otherwise it'd
think,
be boring.
yeah, I think even when I look back at my business, people think just because you start out some way, you have to stay that way. And we need to, as entrepreneurs, we need to remember, there's a reason why we stepped into entrepreneurship, is to be in charge of our own path.
Mm.
And so it's okay to shift, and people get so focused on, like, I have to do this and I have to have this kind of program, and you don't even know what you want in your business yet.
Yeah, yeah. That's such a powerful reminder because, for a lot of us, especially for very successful business owners, we see the end point. We see like, oh, they made it. There's, I don't know, Amazon, there's McDonald's, there's the Starbucks, whatever. But we didn't see the whole journey to get there. There were many, for a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners, there were a lot of hiccups, failures, right? But those were lessons learned to help us get closer and closer to the thing that's going to stick, that's going to be that embodiment, that full alignment. So I think Yes, I fully agree, Michelle. It's not always going to be, oh, I got it. Maybe somebody else is very lucky, but that doesn't sound like your story. Neither was it mine.
Right. And so do you see in your work,
Mhm.
when people kind of come into entrepreneurship, maybe coming from another career, that they're kind of their whole life is kind of misaligned because they're kind of coming in and they're enthusiastic about what it means to have their own business and all of the things that come with that, but they're not it's like figuring out their passion seems to be such an obstacle for them because they've never thought about it, right? They've lived under this identity as maybe what they were in their previous career, the identity of whomever that they are, whether it's the corporate executive assistant, or for you, it was the professor that was so unhappy and that was going home crying at night. There's so many identities that they've had. It's like when they get to the point that they're not fulfilled, they don't know how to get unstuck.
Yeah, so I work with a lot of mommy, I have clients that are moms, and as a new mother myself, I can see how, it can get very difficult to remove yourself from that identity as a mother, right? And you mentioned this, Michelle, that we get so wrapped up in caring for other people that we lose ourselves in that caretaking. And listen, I'm not demonizing being a mom. I love being a mother. As I mentioned, it was a huge turning point in my own life and career, and it was the reason why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. My daughter is inspiration, motivation for me to role model for her. But what I want to role model for her is that I also want to take care of myself first. I want to set those boundaries. And what that means is really taking the time to do that inner work. Becoming a mother helped me do my own inner child work and think through, okay, what were these moments in my life where I felt like I wasn't taken care of, or I felt like I could not be my authentic self. And so I see that in a lot of my clients who are, as you mentioned, maybe they were a mom, a stay-at-home mom for several years, or maybe, especially, I live in the DMV area, so, DC, Maryland, Virginia, and especially in this area, what you do, what your work is very indicative of your status, of your identity. And so in this area, this geographic area that I live in, that's very much in in the lexicon here. It's like, hi, how are you when you go to an event? What do you do? Right. So our work is very much attached to our identity. But before we can even share what that is, what our work is, we really need to know who we are. And so we walk around the planet, walk around the earth, acting, many of us with these masks on, acting like, oh, I'm going to be this person because that's what I think so and so wants me to act like. And so part of the work that I do with my clients, because I found as an entrepreneur myself, I need to know who I am and do my own inner work before I can show up authentically to help other people. And so I then pay it forward with the work that I do with my own clients. I hope that that answers your question.
Yeah, that makes sense because I think a lot of people kind of come into coaching, they come into entrepreneurship, not realizing, you have to be able to solve a problem and you have to be able to do it in a very systematic way so that
Mm-hmm.
people can get results, they can experience a transformation. And how do you do that if you're not willing to do the work yourself?
Yeah.
And I think that's when a cosmic catalyst coach comes in. So, can you share a little bit about, when you work, like what does work look like for a new entrepreneur? Like, what does your work look like? Like, what exactly do you do with them? And to
Yeah,
get them
sure.
realigned and kind of get them, how does that contribute? How does what you do contribute to business success? Let's say that.
Sure, sure. So I developed a model in my, natural academic nerdy professor self. I I developed a model that I use in all of my client work. It's called the inner muse method. And what that involves is MUSE. There's the M, which is for model. So essentially, before we do any of the other work, I have my clients take a look at who their role models are, right? Who do you see yourself being, or who do you aspire to be, or who inspires you? For me, it's folks like Oprah Winfrey, right? As a media professional who is so much more than that now that she's built her empire. So it's who really inspires you to do the work that you want to do, right? And then we get to you, which is understand, which essentially is that mindset work that we were just talking about, Michele, where before you even can serve others, you need to remove those limiting beliefs, tap into any imposter syndrome, because right, as new entrepreneurs especially, it's who am I? Like, who am I to be this coach? Who am I to be this business owner? What am I going to do to serve people? What is my unique differentiator? Those sorts of things. And then we move into the S, which is the structure. So that's where the rubber hits the road and we get into consistent practices like a morning routine, right? So I know for me, I meditate every morning. It really gets my mindset in the right day. I do it before I even get my 19-month-old daughter up, who's very good, by the way. She just chills in her crib, which I'm very
awesome.
fortunate that she doesn't like go wild. But, I see her on the monitor, but I still do at least a 5-minute meditation every morning, whether that's running. I know some friends love to run. I'm not one of those friends.
And neither am I.
Whatever that morning consistent routine is it journaling? Is it scripting? What have you? So it's having that consistency there. It's the structure. It's creating, from a business standpoint, what is the structure of marketing automation? What is the structure of your messaging, right? It's getting those pieces down so that you know who you are, you did the mindset work, you got the role models. All right, now let's build the structure. And then the last part of that model is the E, which is the expand. So how are you expanding? Expansion in terms of networks, right? So in order to get to that higher level, that higher vibration, that higher place of consciousness where you want to be, where you see yourself, you need to surround yourself with people who are at that same vibe and energy, right?
Absolutely.
And that may include maybe letting go of some people, maybe, and again, it's not, goodbye forever. It's just maybe that, and maybe it is goodbye forever. Who knows? If there's someone toxic, if there's folks that, again, as we talked about, see this and are like, what's going on here? I don't get it. I don't understand it. You can explain what you're doing. And oftentimes it's folks projecting their own stuff, right? That they see you being this amazing, authentic, radiant self, and then projecting their insecurities. Have the conversation and move it along if you have to. But it's expanding in these ways. It's expansion through podcasts like these, right? Like right. Michele, talking to folks like you to spread the word about your business, share your message, going on Instagram, Facebook Live, just getting on stages. I know that during COVID, that's been difficult. There's been a lot of virtual
stages,
but finding those virtual stages, going on to Clubhouse. I know I've been a fan of using that app to spread my network. So it's that expansion, and it's also expansion in your own embodiment. Now that you understand who you are and what your message is, now that you have that consistent structure and who you aspire to be through those role models, go ahead, go out there, be your audacious self, be unapologetic, because that's what the world needs to see. We no longer need to see the you that had the mask on, the you that was contrived and acting based on other people's expectations, the people pleasing. No, thank you. We're done with that. You are stepping into your own power in your divine essence. And that's the transformation work that I do with my clients, using that model and helping them through things like astrology, those cosmic modalities, getting into that realignment. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's what I'm working toward. I'm in the process of writing a book that really explicates the method, but it's been really fun working with my clients using this.
And you mentioned, the messaging, working with people on their messaging. And I think that is
Mm,
so key because people don't realize that if you don't know your message, then it's going to be really hard to speak to anyone because you can't speak to everyone. And
hmm
people are so afraid to kind of step into who they are and to claim this is my message and this is what I offer, and everything actually centers around that.
hmm
So it's amazing how astrology plays into that too. So I'm a Pisces. So what does that say?
Michelle, I'm a Pisces as well.
When's your
Oh, we are
birthday?
kindred spirits, March 16th.
Oh, I'm February 22nd.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So Pisces. I
And
mean,
they
it's
say we're weird, we cry all the time.
well, what's in another misnomer about astrology, right? It's not, listen, Pisces, yes, we may be sensitive and we may cry, but for me personally, there are other your astrological chart is not just your zodiac sign. There are all these other planets that make up your chart. And so even though yes, I do have, and perhaps you do as well, I do have aspects of Pisces, like I am creative, I'm sensitive, I'm emotional, but because I have a Taurus moon and a Capricorn rising, which are, other aspects of the chart, those earth signs ground me.
Okay.
So because I have a Capricorn rising in my chart, I'm able to see the broad view. I can make plans, I can organize, I can get things together. And then that Taurus, the Taurus is all about, you know, about comfort and good food and coziness and aesthetic. And so that all really plays out. So I just want, to that point, right? And that's when other people come to me like, oh, Rowena, I'm not a typical Cancer or I'm not a typical Gemini. Well, yes, because that's just one part of your astrological makeup, right? So Pisces folks, since we are the last sign of the zodiac, we absorb all the other energies of the zodiac chart. So we are very empathic by nature. We're very intuitive by nature. We are connectors. We love building community. I mean, as evidenced by this podcast you are doing and helping fellow business owners, that is so in alignment with Pisces. So just letting you know, just affirming you that you're onto
That I'm
something
more
with
than just
what
being
you're doing.
crazy, right? And emotional.
Yes, yes. And you know what? We allow people, we give people permission. That is okay because some folks keep it all inside and that's not so healthy either. So go ahead and cry. I'm here for it.
So how do we take all of these different elements of who we are, like,
Mhm.
let's say, for example, we're Pisces and you have all of these other elements woven in. How does that help us market and really attract our ideal clients to us?
Yeah, so if you want, we can use Pisces as an example if that would make the most sense. But so for example, Pisces, we're a water sign. So as I mentioned, water signs, we are all about, and that's also our issue. Sometimes we have permeable boundaries, so that might be hard as well. So when it comes to our astrological chart, because we're this water sign, creativity is very important in the work that we do. So something to keep in mind is, you know, don't you don't have to do what everyone else is doing, right? That because we are strong, intuitive spirits by nature, maybe feeling into that. That's what's so important about that consistent practice of that inner work, because you're not going to know that, right? If you are so busy going from A to B to C to doing all the things at 70 miles per hour and not taking the time to sit in stillness and really ideate and create that message, right? That brand that you want to be, it's just not going to work. And so, whereas, for example, a Leo, my parents are both Leos. I have a lot of Leo friends. Leo is a fire sign. Leo is their planet is the sun. Leo is very is like the flair, right? For the dramatics, it's very confident. So they may be a little more bold and audacious and maybe in your face a little bit more versus Pisces, we're all about building those connections. Maybe, for example, having a really solid Facebook group. I finally started mine literally last week because I said, okay, I'm feeling at the point now where I can start building that community. So, there may be different tactics or different strategies from a marketing or communication or business planning perspective that tie into whether you're a water sign versus a fire sign, what your specific astrological sign and chart may look like will then dictate. That even goes into colors as well, right? So from a branding perspective, your vibe may feel into where you are astrologically.
So instead of following every single trend online, you need to first self-reflect about who you are, what, right down to your, the core of who you are, so that you can come out and come across as your authentic self at all times. Yeah, that's an amazing message. Yes.
Yeah. And especially as Pisces folks, as I mentioned, we have those permeable boundaries. So we have a tendency to absorb, I think that we can get overwhelmed doing that comparisonitis, right? Seeing what everyone else is doing and but Michele, I'm sure you've seen this, and maybe in your own work, I know I've seen it too, when you're trying to be a copycat or do something that just because it seems successful, it's not going to work for you because it's not
right.
It's not aligned to you.
and you don't know what went on in the back end of that,
Exactly.
and what, you just see the front end and you see what you think is success without really delving deep into who you are and what's going to make you successful.
Absolutely.
So what is a closing message that you would have for the listeners?
So I love to share this quote just because it has been a through line in the work that I do for myself and for my clients. I am a community theater performer here. Well, I haven't been because of COVID-19. That's been a little difficult to stand on stage and sing at people. But one of my favorite shows is Dear Evan Hansen. And
my daughters too. Oh my God.
Oh,
well, she hasn't seen it, but she loves like these show tunes. Yeah.
It's a great show. My husband and I saw it on Broadway. We got tickets when we got married in 2016. So we got to see it in New York, and it's a powerful show. So Ben Platt, who is the main character, Evan Hansen, when he won the Tony Award, he said something to the effect of this. I change it slightly when I share this quote, but essentially it is, what makes you different makes you powerful.
That is awesome.
Yeah, that's the message of the show. It's the message that I like to share in my work and with my clients, that again, we don't need to be like everybody else, because you are a beautiful, unique being as you are. You are radiant and magnificent as you are. Your astrological chart, your makeup is not like anybody else's. So why try to fit yourself into a box? Why try to force yourself to be someone that you're not? And for me, when I embrace the fact that I am a multi-hyphenate, that I am a teacher, a writer, a mentor, a coach, a performer, a mother, an entrepreneur, when I show myself in these nuances and I didn't try to compartmentalize myself in this way, it has been truly game-changing and transformational and powerful. And I hope to use that work to inspire others to do the same.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your insightfulness and, and just encouraging people to focus on their mindset and focus on being their authentic self as they're trying to serve others. So with that being said, thank you for joining us for the Boss Experience podcast, and I'll see you in the next episode.